through the Gemara. We're going to start from the answer of Reb Ashi. So let me bring up the text from last week. Hold on. Okay. Here we go. Basically, we have a Mishnah. The Mishnah says that, because I just want to make sure we did this piece correct last week. The Mishnah says that we have, as you remember before, the Mishnah quoted the actual text of the Mishnah says on Ches Amud Beis. So it says there's no difference between Sfarim, and again, seemingly Sfarim means all the Sifrei Kodesh, meaning the Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim, of how we write them, or comparable to Tefillin and Mezuzahs. Just that Sfarim could be written in all languages, and Tefillin and Mezuzahs must be written in Ashuris, which is what we know today as Lashon HaKodesh, the alphabet as we know them today, not Ivris either. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says that the Sfarim also are not allowed to be written in any language, just the language of Greek, of Greek, ancient Greek. But there's no, you can't write it in English or any other language, Mandarin or anything like that. So that's the mission that we have. We had a brisa. We quoted that the brisa says, the brisa which is brought down in the Tosefta, it says that Mikra, something from the Torah that was written, that should be in Hebrew, in Lashon HaKodesh, that was written in Targum in Aramaic. Parts that it means that words that are written in the Hebrew alphabet, but the word itself is Aramaic, like Yigash Hadusa that we have in Vayetze, or Targum, something that was supposed to be written in Aramaic, and was written instead of Aramaic, was written the Hebrew word for that, which would be Gal Eid, which is the Hebrew word for Yigash Hadusa. Ksav Ivri, the alphabet being in Ivri, which is ancient Hebrew, versus what we know today as Lashon HaKodesh. So he says, it's not considered biblical text to the extent that it would make the hands impure, which we learned before. That's for Sifrei Kodesh, for holy books, unless it's written as shuris and it has to be written properly with ink and parchment, etc. So we have our mission that says that according to the Tanakama, the first opinion of the Mishnah, that says you can write Sifrei Torah seemingly in any language, where Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says it has to be written in either Kodesh or Greek. And then we have a brisa that says that everything, all Sifrei Kodesh, seemingly it's talking about Sifrei Kodesh, has to be written in Heshuk, as we're just going back a bit, has to be written in Ashuris, it has to be written properly, the Lashon HaKodesh and Lashon HaKodesh, the Targum, the Aramaic and its Aramaic, meaning even though it's Hebrew alphabet, but the word itself has to pronounce either Lashon HaKodesh when it's supposed to, Aramaic when it's supposed to, and it has to be written on parchment, ink, and Ashuris with proper what we know today as the Hebrew alphabet of the Torah. So we gave one answer. The final answer we gave before was that our brisa is talking about the Megillah, and the Megillah is different than regular Sifrei Torah because the pasuk says Kiksavim L'Chshaynam. It has to be written similarly, like we have Vahoyu by Tefillin and Mezuzahs, Vahoyu Advarim Elu. It has to be written exactly as it was written in the Torah, which is a limud that we have for Tefillin and Mezuzahs. We have Kiksavim L'Chshaynam by the Megillah, and therefore it has to be written ink, Lashon HaKodesh, etc. So that was the first answer that we had after we discussed through different options and said, what is the Aramaic? Because it has to have possibility for Aramaic. So we said that Piskam is Aramaic and Yakar is Aramaic, and those words have to be written in Aramaic, even though it has to be written like it says over here, Pei, Saf, Gimel, Mem, which is Lashon HaKodesh, but it pronounces the word Piskam, which the word is Aramaic. Yikar also is a word of Aramaic. Okay, so that was one answer. The other answer is Reb Ashi, again, we're going back because we're actually not too far into this, and also I think we did it a bit incorrect. So he says like this. Ravashi Omer Rashi says like this. Kitanya hi b'shar sfarim. That the Brisa is talking about other books, meaning not Sifrei Torah, other books of Tanakh. Rashi says Nevi'im Uksuvim. V'Rabbi Yehuda, and this is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. What does it mean? This is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. So we say, like, and our Mishnah is our Mishnah, and it's not a contradiction. I mean, like this: the Tanya we learned, tefillin umezuzas ein nichtavim el ashuris. Everyone agrees that when you write a tefillin and you write the mezuzas, they must be written in the ashuris. Again, ashuris is the lashon hakodesh, the alphabet that we know as today. V'Rabbeinu itiru yivanas. So the Brisa says, and the rabbis permitted that it should be written in Greek. So he says, V'achsiv, how could you say that the rabbis permitted to be written in Greek? No one could agree to that because we have V'hayu. When it says V'hayu, it has to be exactly as it says in the Torah, i.e. Lashon HaKodesh. So therefore, you have to say that there's missing words. It's not read properly. So how do we have to read the Brisa, this other Brisa? It's not our Brisa, it's second Brisa. It's Sfarim Nichtavim B'Chol that Rabbi Seinu, when he says Tefillin, that it says like this. What you're supposed to read is Sfarim, the books of the Torah could be written in any language. But our rabbis said it has to be Yavanis, and they permitted it to be Yavanis. So you're saying, what do you mean? The wording again doesn't mean Hitiru, again doesn't make sense, because Hitiru means that they're adding something, not eliminating something. If the Tanna Kama holds, the first opinion holds that you can write any language, so the language Hitiru is not adding, it's limiting. So Hitiru Michlal the Tanna Kama Savar, the Tanna Kama Aser. That means the original opinion is that it's forbidden to write in any language, even Greek. Michlal Tanna Kama Bitmi. It's a question about Tanna Kama Shar B'Choloshin. We just said that the first opinion is you can write in any language. So the word Hitiru is limiting, not an addition. So then, so we have to reword it again. What is our brisa? That you don't say the word hitiru. You say that the rabbis are coming to limit that although the Tanna Kama, the first opinion says you could have it in any language, the rabbis who argue on the Tanna Kama on the single opinion say it's only permitted to be written in Yavanis in Greek, which would be similar to our Mishnah with Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. Vitanya, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yehuda adds this, that Af Kishetiru Rabbeinu Yavanis, even when our rabbi said that the Sifrei Torah, the Sfarim, the seemingly the Tanakh, can be written in Greek, Leitiru Ele b'Sefer Torah. It's only talking about Sefer Torah, but nothing else can be written in Greek. Only a Sefer Torah. Why? Like we learned, Mishum Ma'aseh the Talmai HaMelech, because of the story of Talmai HaMelech, which is what we're going to learn in a second, which we learned at the end of last week's class, which is when he had 72 rabbis translate the Torah into 72 languages and into Greek, and then into Greek. And because of the miracle that happened, that they translated it and made the changes equally, everyone without consulting with each other, because they're all tied up and they're all locked up privately in their own little chamber, so they couldn't communicate. There was no WhatsApp, there was no phones, and therefore they translated it equally. They made a whole bunch of changes, and those changes, it was miraculous. The miracle is two things. The first miracle was that they made all the same changes. The second miracle was that they had confidence that they would make all the same changes. Because when you make a change, you don't know if the next person is going to make a change. So they had a divine inspiration to know that that they should make the changes and that this is the right thing to do. And it's not going to be damaging, because even though you don't know what the next person is doing in the translation. Okay, this is what we learned last week. So what we're saying over here is, so what's Rabbi Yehuda say? So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda is basically that's how you would say the Brisa, meaning to say that Rabbi Yehuda says that all other Sifrei Torah have to be written in Lashon HaKodesh. All the other of the books of Nevi'im Eksuvim have to be written in Lashon HaKodesh. Why? Because the only one thing that's permitted is the Sefer Torah to be written in Greek, because of the story of Talmai HaMelech. And therefore, our brisa that says before that everything has to be written in its proper way, which would be Ashuris, die, and all that stuff, that would be the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who says that the Greek is only because in the beginning last week we learned he wanted to say it's Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. We say you can't say it's Reb Shimon ben Gamliel because Reb Shimon ben Gamliel approves for it to be in Greek. So Rabbi Yehuda is saying that we're not talking about every book. We're only talking about the Torah, but the other books Torah Nevi, the Nevi'im and Ksuvim have to be written in Ashuris, have to be written in Hebrew, can't be written in Greek, and have to be written in with ink and with parchment, and it has to be with the the Aramaic properly and the Hebrew properly, etc. And that would make sense also in the Ksuvim because you have Nehemiah, which is in Aramaic, so that everything kind of fits in. If it's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, which comes to explain basically Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Okay, so we're not going to do the Tosfos on this. Actually, I want to do this Tosfos Rabashi because it gives a little explanation. Rashi Omer Hu B'Shar Sfarim, that it's talking about the other books, the Brisa that we brought back last page on 8b that we quoted last class that says that it has to be written in Hebrew and in parchment and etc. That's talking about other books, not the Sefer Torah. It's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who says that only a Sefer Torah, I mean the 5 books of Moshe, can be translated into Greek. The Kasha, so Tosa has a question in the chapter called Kisvei, which is the name of a chapter of one of the chapters of Shabbos. Shabbos has many chapters, I think 22 or 24. Is Omer Ravashi. Ravashi says, "Ein bein tzfarim leMegillah, elisha tzfarim nichtavim chol lashon Megillah ein tzarach ashuris." Now Ravashi himself says that the difference between the Megillah and the rest of the books of the Torah, meaning all the Torah, Nevi'im, Ksuvim, is that the Megillah has to be written in Hebrew Ashuris in the proper language, where the other Sfarim can be written in all languages. So how can you say Rabbi Yehuda is that Rabashi is the one who says that Rabbi Yehuda says that the other Sfarim have to be written in Ashuris? V'sefer D'Yovim kein menalei Ravashi loymar the Rabbi Yehuda machmer matchach chuli hai v'halei eshka chasim shum tani depligi. We don't find anyone that argues in that statement. So we have earlier a statement later in Shabbos or earlier in Shabbos that says that the difference between a Sefer Torah and the Megillah is that all the other Sifarim besides Megillah, means all the other books, Torah, Nevi'im, Ksuvim, can be written in all language, and no one seems to be arguing that. So how can you say Rabbi Yehuda over here argues in that? Shlomo, he says that this is talking about something else. We're not talking about what you could write. We're talking about the laws of Shabbos. In the laws of Shabbos, the question is, when it comes to fire, what's considered something that's holy, that it could be saved? Over there, we're talking about a fire. And you have to save the books because of a fire, where there's leniency when it comes to fire on Shabbos, even though on Shabbos you're not allowed to carry things outside in the public or in a carmelist. So if one goes over there, you're going to learn how do we protect sacred Sfarim on Shabbos when it's not exactly a Shus Haram. If it's a carmelist, there's different laws. That over there, when it comes about saving books, sacred books in a fire on Shabbos, so languages doesn't make a difference. Because still there's holy names in them. It's like a chumash. There's holy names in the books, even if it's not written in Hebrew. So therefore it's worthy to be saved. But a Megillah doesn't have God's name in it. Everyone knows that the book of the Megillah of Esther does not have any name of God in it. So therefore if it's not written properly, it's not a sacred book. It's not a sacred text. Then it has to be written according to the law. Meaning over there in Shabbos, we're not talking about writing a Sefer Torah according to the law. We're writing out if you wrote a Sefer Torah, not according to the law to make it have the kedusha, the holiness of a Sefer Torah, but it's still the text of the Torah. It's just written in English, right? If you have a book in English, it's still a chumash, and it has God's name in it. So it comes to Shabbos, you're allowed to be lenient according to the law. You have to check the law. What are the leniencies? But whatever those leniencies are applicable even to what we'd call today a chumash. But when it comes to the Megillah, because there's no name of God in it, so if you don't write it according to the way it's considered Kodesh, then it's just a text. It's not a holy text. But here we're not talking about saving it from a fire. Here we're talking about considered the sacred book as a Sefer Torah. That's a different conversation. Therefore, it's not a contradiction. Okay. So this is the answer of Abashi. So we have two answers of why the Bryce is not a contradiction to our Mishnah, because our Mishnah that says you could write it in any language according to the first opinion is referring to all other Sfarim but the Megillah. The second, the Bryce is referring to the Megillah. And the second answer is that the Bryce is according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, which holds books have to be written in Lashon HaKodesh, which is basically what the halachic is today. The only part that can be written in Greek, in only Greek, is the Sefer Torah because of the miracle that happened in the story of Talmai HaMelech that we're going to do again right now. the Sfas Emes, the Ger Rebbe, asked the question on this, that the miracle of Talmai HaMelech, the fact that the Talmai HaMelech put 72 rabbis in Alexandria into isolation and had them translate the book of the Torah into Greek, and the miracle was that they did it properly and they made changes properly, and is all nice and good. But that was a situation they had no choice. It wasn't like Talmai HaMelech was asking them, "Would you do me a favor?" He didn't give them a choice. It was Pikuach Nefesh. I mean, obviously, what would happen if the rabbi said to Talmai HaMelech, "Sorry, Talmai HaMelech, we're not doing it"? In those days, that's enough to be put to death, right? The king says to do something, you have to do it. So the question is, why does that translate to later in life after the story that it should be permissible to write it in Greek? It was a one-time thing that should have been that was permitted because they were forced to. So the Sfas Emes answers that really, according to the Torah, you could write in all language. The rabbis were strict. So because the story of Talmai HaMelech, they didn't add the restriction on the Torah. It means if it would have been biblically forbidden to translate it to the Nikreis, they did it by force, they did it by force. It'd be a one-time thing. But if the rabbis added on the restrictions, saying we don't want you to do it in other languages, we want to keep it in Lashon Kodesh, so because of the miracle, they didn't add it on in this case. So it's a rabbinic addition not to be able to translate it. So says the Sfas Emes. A few other points I wanted to bring out. Hold on a second. Okay, let's go back to the Gemara. Okay, so it says like this. What was the story of Talmai HaMelech? So Ma'aseh b'Talmai HaMelech, we learned this again last week. Shekinas Shivim Mishnayim Zkenim, he took 72 rabbis, elders, meaning the Sanhedrin, not just any rabbis, and he put the heads of the Sanhedrin from this. We brought down the Rashash, I think, says that we learned that we know that the Sanhedrin is 71. What's 72? The Nasi. The Nasi is separate from the Av Bezdin, we know, right? So we have Hillel and Shammai. So Hillel was the Nasi and Shammai was the Av Bezdin. So together 72. He took the 72 heads of the Sanhedrin and put them in isolation. He put them into 72 different homes. He doesn't tell them why he's putting them in. He went into each one individually. Write down the Torah of Moshe, meaning the Chumash, the 5 books of Moshe, in Greek. God gave wisdom to each one of them within their heart. Meaning, again, the miracle is twofold. One was that they translated it equally, and that they all had the confidence to know that the next person would translate it. It means to make changes. Rashi says, Talmai HaMelech Mitzri. The later it's interesting. The Rashi again is not a historian, so why does he have to tell us Melech Mitzri Haya? Later, one of the commentaries says that that's a significant point. That one of the changes they don't make, for instance, we don't find that they made the change of the story of Ruvain. We talked about it last week, yesterday in the Shmuz. That that Ruvain, the story of Ruvain, that he, it says that Ruvain slept with his father's wife. So why didn't they make a change over there? Because it could have been, Rashi says he just turned over the bed. Why didn't they change that? So one of the commentators say Melech Mitzri, he was a magician. In Egyptian culture, that kind of misconduct, incest, or things like that wasn't something that they frowned upon. Because they didn't frown upon that, the rabbis didn't make that change. That's what I think. I forget who says that. We'll see that later. Okay, so again, Talmai HaMelech was, we learned that last week. He was from 246 to 85. He was the grandson or the son of the first Ptolemy, the king. This was the division of Alexander the Great's division, the southern kingdom, that built up the whole Alexandria and the knowledge of Egypt. And later, by the way, that became a Jewish settlement for many, many years. Egypt was something that was part of the Jewish settlement, that they even had. We know that they even had a temple in Egypt, right? The temple of Chani. Chania was one of the sons of Shimon the Righteous, that he went down to Egypt and he built a temple there. It's not clear, according to the opinions, if the temple was positive or negative. Most opinions is it was negative because it was for Avodah Zarah, or if it wasn't for Avodah Zarah, it was for the Gentiles, or even if it was for the Gentiles, the question is if it's allowed to be for the Gentiles outside of the Beis HaMikdash. There's a lot of discussion about the Beis HaMikdash of Chania that was built around the times of Talmai HaMelech. But when the Rebbe in 1992, when the Rebbe discussed about everything that's going to come back with Mashiach, the Rebbe actually mentioned the Beis HaMikdash of Chania. So it seems like it wasn't so simple that it was a bad thing. All right. So what does he tell them? So they start writing and they start making changes. What are the changes that they make? Because of Elikim bar Bereshis. So we learned this last week, that instead of saying Bereshis bar Elikim, they said God, Elikim bara, God created Bereshis in the beginning. Instead of in the beginning, God created. Why? Because the Greeks would never have subscribed to the idea that the Torah wouldn't be mentioned with God's name. And therefore, they would say Bereshis is a God and Elikim is a God. So there's two Rishuyas. Again, this is a pagan society. So we had to show that we believe in one God. So they didn't want to bring any space for misinterpretation. Next thing, based on the same idea, was Naasa Adam Mitzalmenu B'Dusenu, when God speaks in the plural and says, let's make man in our image and our form, they changed it to Esa Adam, I will make man, B'Tselem, in a form and an image. So there's two things. One is that he's not talking as if there's another God to talk to, even though, like we said, the Rashi in the Chumash says that that's a sign that even that a Gadol, that someone who's greater would consult in someone smaller in the angels, and also they would think from it that God has an image. So not to think that there's an image of God. So he said B'Tselem and B'Dmus, and not B'Tzalmeinu B'Dmusenu, in our image, in our form, as if God has an image and a form. So there they made two changes. Rashi says Elikim bar Bereshis, Esa Shemaim Shalai Yoimar Bereshis Shemu V'Shtei Rishuyas saying Bereshis bar Esa Sheni. You shouldn't think that Bereshis created Elikim. Esa Adam, I will make man. Shemikan Pakruha Oimrim Shtei Rishuyas saying the Chsiv Nasa Adam. So you shouldn't think that Rashi learns that the question is that we will make man. God was talking in the plural. There's no plural. It's only I will make man. And also others commentaries learn the question is, of course, the Dmus and the Tzelem, that God doesn't have an image and a form. That's the Rashash. Okay, Tosfos says like this: Elikim bar Bereshis, Pirsha Kundashim Kasva Bereshis bar Ayu Oimim Bereshis Shemu V'Shtei Rishuyas saying that Rashi says Tosfos, again the grandchild. Most of the Tosfos were descendants of Rashi. So the yeshiva of the Tosfos, they say that they quote their grandfather Rashi, who says that the reason why we don't say Bereshis bar Elikim because Bereshis they would say is a deity. So they say V'Kosher Rashi. So Tosfos asked a question on his grandfather. Shari Bereshis ein shem klal ela betchila. Who would ever think the word Bereshis means a God? Bereshis just means in the beginning. No one would think that the word in the beginning is a God. Not only that, they didn't write Hebrew; they wrote it in Greek, so there's even less of a chance of misunderstanding, right? Venerally, therefore, they say they have a rule: the Creator should always be mentioned first. Vimke, the God should be created first. Ilu kosvu bereshis koydem hayu omer shtei rishuyim vateva harishona have boira echad ve'elikim have vateva harishona have boira echad ve'elikim have hasheni mishum achi avchalei. That they would think that the first word, and whatever that word is, doesn't make a difference if the word means something basic, like in the beginning. If you start with God. I just want to say something. We learned in the Gemara in Sanhedrin about tomorrow night is Shavuos B'Tammuz, where we remember the beginning of the destruction of the temple. So we learned in the Gemara in Sanhedrin that what did Nebuchadnezzar was a horrible person. He was a murderer. He was a king. He was in the same places that we're dealing with today in the area of Bavel and Madai and Paras, all that area, the area of Macedonia, right? So what did he ever do worthy to be so powerful? And we learned in Sanhedrin, in the war of Sancheriv, he lived obviously a long time, that he didn't like the wording, how they spoke about God. That when they wrote a letter to King Chizkiyahu, and he said, 1 second, you didn't write it right. It's not respectful enough to God. And because he took 3 steps to call back the traveler, to change the writing, he merited to have 3 generations of rule over the world. So from here we see, as bad as Nebuchadnezzar was and all those things, there was a sensitivity to God. So in some way over here, also the Greeks would not, there was a certain sensitivity to the divine. That there's no way you would start the Torah without mentioning the divine first. See the Tosefta, where this explanation and the significance of the change are questioned. The believers in two powers explained that Bereshis refers to the Logos, the divine will. Since they took it to the next level and totally separated the Logos from God, it was necessary to write that it was God who created this world, not in the beginning, which means a kind of divine. See the translation in the Jerusalem Targum of the word Bereshis as in his wisdom. So his wisdom could be, it's talking about the wisdom of this other deity, of this other God. Nasa Adam, some note that the translation resolves an additional problem. As from the original verse, one could draw that the mistaken conclusion that God has a human form. So there's two questions. One is that he's talking in the plural. Like the Rashash says, he quotes here the Rashash, this Vasemes, that also the idea of Demus and Tselem, a person may think God has a form. Therefore, they wrote in the image and in image and likeness. See the explanation, the Ibn Ezra commentary in Torah. Okay, that's another change that they made. Okay, this is pretty much where we're getting close to where we were holding last week. They changed the words from that we have in our Torah that says God finished on the seventh day. So here he says he finished on the sixth day. And he rested on the seventh day. Why? So because they would say you just said that the rest is on the seventh day, and now you're saying that he finished on the seventh day means he was doing something on the seventh day. So therefore they changed it that he finished everything on the sixth day. Again, Rashi says we're going to go back to the text in a second. He did work on Shabbos. Because our pasuk says that he finished on the seventh day. Like we said last week, that they wouldn't accept the concept of menucha. Menucha is a creation, because menucha is a gift to the Jewish people. And because it's a menucha, meaning calmness, to rest. The rest itself is a gift to the Jewish people, that only the Jewish people got that gift from God. That's what we say in the tefillah of the benching on Shabbos. We say that the gift of menucha was only given to the Jewish people. So because it wasn't given to the Gentiles, they wouldn't subscribe to it. They would say, they don't know what we're talking about. There is no such concept as menucha. Bas Shabbos, bas menucha, v'zeh gomru. With that Shabbos, the whole Shabbos, what does he mean? He finished on the seventh day. He gave the concept of menucha. Because that was only given to the Jewish people, they wouldn't subscribe to them. Another thing they changed, he said, Zachor and Keva Baroi. Not Bar. So in the text, it says Baram. He created them. So they didn't want them to think that man and woman were created separately. So it said that man and woman, he was created. For Baram, Rashi says the mashma shnei gufim, that initially he created two bodies. Bara kol echad zachor nekeva shtei partzufim lechein kasvu baru shekach nivra adam b'shnei partzufim. Only first man was created with two forms, the form of man and woman equally together. Okay, Reb Steinzat says, is written in the Jerusalem Talmud and elsewhere, that the changes was that the creation of female was not mentioned at all. Okay, not that it says that they just eliminated the whole idea of creation of the female, because the pasuk is confusing. Why? Because if you look at the pasuk in the text in the Chumash, it seems like man and woman created, and then it says that woman came from man. So which one is it? If man and woman created, then what was the second creation? So the Jerusalem Talmud figured just to avoid the whole conversation and just didn't mention the creation of the woman. But the way we understand it, the way Torah explains it, is that first man was created in the image of man, with the form of man and woman, and then when he separated the woman from the man, Kimi Isha, that's why she says, I came from my husband. B'yom HaShvi, there's nothing distinctive about the seventh day of the feast to make it worthy of special mention. Therefore, the verse must be distinguished, discussing the seventh day of the week. Okay, I'm not sure. We didn't understand this footnote last time either. Okay, another cases. In the case of the Tower of Babylon, the Tower of Babylon says Erda no ve'era. So he says over here, Hava Erda ve'ebloim sham sfasa. The text itself says, "Come, let us go down." And there confound their language. So there again, God is talking plurally. So here he says, I'm going to go down and I will confuse their language. And so again, shouldn't give a place for them to think that there's a discussion. Who's God discussing this with? Another thing they changed, it says, Vatitzchak Sara bik roiveha. So it says, in the verse, it's talking about skipping forward to Parshas Vayera, when God sends the angels to Avram, it says Sarah hears the angels' information that they say that there's going to be a child being born, and it says Sarah laughs. So it says, the pasuk says Vatitzchak Sarah bikirba, that she laughed privately inside of her, but they changed it to bikroiveha, so to say, with her, that she discussed it with her relatives, with her friends. She went out and laughed at it in public, basically. Why did they do that? So Rashi says, that the Talmud would say, 1 second, it's not fair. Avram also laughs. In Parshas Lech Lecha, when he hears the first time, he laughs. It says that Avram laughs. And Sarah gets punished and not Avram. So so Rashi says, because Avram was inside privately, he was laughing. But Sarah went and made a big deal about it and spoke about it to other people. So that was worth to be criticized. So says the Rashi. Others say that there's also the difference is the word kervayim means your intestines, your inside, what's going on inside of you. It's brought down in Rashi in the Chumash that what did Sarah say? She quoted the Medrash. She says she looked at herself. This body could, basically she's saying, she's describing her body. Could this body have a child? This body can't have a child. She says, I'm past the age. My body's past its ability to have a child. So she was questioning God. Avram wasn't questioning God, because the whole, actually, just for the basic text, the whole laughing doesn't really make much sense. Why? Because it wasn't like a revolutionary idea to have children. Shem was born when Noach was 500 years old. Okay, so that's before the flood. But even after the flood, people were being born late. Like, it's not today in 2026 when someone to have a child at 100 years old. Also, it's not such a crazy concept. But that a woman at a 90 today, it's not going to happen. But those days, it was not so crazy. So therefore, Avram was just happy. He was just excited about it. And Sarah was questioning it, because she said, look at my body. My body's past its ability to have a child. And therefore it says that she became young again. Her body, so it wasn't like she was talking out of nonsense. It says that God made a miracle, made her body young. Okay, they changed another thing. It says in the rebuke that Yaakov gives his sons, Levi and Shimon, at the end of Yechi. So it says, Ki ba'arpam hargu ish. In their anger, they killed a man. So they changed it, Ki ba'arpam hargu shar, that he killed an ox. Shar would also allude to Yosef, which was considered the blessing of the ox. Ubritzainim akru evus, and in their self-will, Britzainim, they uprooted a thorough. So what is this? What's the idea? What were they trying to avoid? What were they scared about? So it says what they were scared about, like Rashi is going to say that again they did it backwards, but here Hargu ish shar shloyemer atchanim hayavesechem. Talmai HaMelech would say your forefathers were murderers because Yaakov said they killed someone. Shar aviyim meid aleim shem Hargu ish. Kachas v'shar shloyhayich shuvim be'enav elke behemis v'loyhik b'dal behemis. That what? This is an interesting answer. Also, who did they kill? They killed the city of Shechem. Again, we see it's amazing. Here we're talking about Talmai HaMelech, which is what, let's say 2,200 years ago, right? He was about, what did he say, 22 BC, right? So let's say 2,200 years ago that this story happened. And the narrative was so important. We see today people are using a lot of information that's happening today in the world. The narrative it's all about the narrative, how you word it. So what does Rashi say? Rashi doesn't say that they just killed animals in Shechem, because they didn't just kill animals in Shechem, they killed the whole city. What Rashi says is that Yaakov wasn't considering it that they killed people. That Shechem, all the people in Shechem were like animals. And therefore they were killed, so therefore there was no value there. Meaning to say, what's Rashi saying? Talmai HaMelech was okay with that. The fact that Talmai HaMelech says that Yaakov didn't view it as murdering a city of people was because the things happen. There's a punishment. Therefore, it's like killing animals. But had Yaakov rebuked and said that the Hargu ish, then we see that Yaakov considered it murder, and Talmai HaMelech pay attention to how Yaakov viewed it. You're saying you yourself said that they murdered, right? When people get quoted the whole time, the Israeli press itself said X, Y, and Z. So it's sometimes how you even translate. You have to be careful how you translate the narrative of a story, because Talmai HaMelech says, you tell me how you see the story. If you see it as they killed animals, we'll say it's animals. You say it's killed people, then why do you murder? Because it doesn't. Again, we're not changing the facts. We're just changing how Yaakov viewed it. That's what he says over here. That Yaakov only viewed them as animals, and therefore, and Talmai HaMelech accepted that, because that made sense to them. But if you're going to call it murder, then we have an issue. That means even if Yaakov considered them to be murderers, and that Yaakov, the rabbis had to be careful with that. Again, they changed another thing. Those who remember, we learned the Gemara in Bilam in Sanhedrin. So last week was Parshas Bilam, right? So it says Moshe took his wife on the chamor, on the donkey. So Talmai HaMelech would have found that strange. That why is Moshe riding a donkey? Why doesn't Moshe have a horse? Why is Moshe coming in on a motorcycle? Why isn't he coming in a limousine? If Moshe is the Redeemer, there's a lot of questions that Talmai HaMelech would have had if Moshe was taking a donkey. Why? Another thing is the donkey's slow. If you're coming to, it says an interesting thing. Talmai HaMelech was saying, second, you're here to redeem the Jewish people. Get on your fastest vehicle. Why are you going on a donkey? The donkey takes longer to get there. God said to redeem people, jump on a horse. So the answer is because the chamor represents to break the chomer. The chamor represents the chamor of Mashiach. This is the same chamor of Avram Avinu. But that's too much information for Talmai HaMelech. Talmai HaMelech is looking at the facts. Again, it's all about the narrative. So therefore they changed the words. That Moshe put them on a noise b'nei adam, on a means of transportation, which whatever the means are, which can mean in those days a camel or a horse. Noise b'nei adam, the mashmer gomel, crossing in a camel. Shlo yomer, so the Talmai HaMelech shouldn't say Moshe rabchem lo yolei susay gomel. So Rashi learns that he would ask, what's wrong with your leader? That he has to come in on a banged up car, on a donkey? Where's his horse if he's such an important person? Where's his gomel? Where's his donkey? Where's his camel? So again, there's different Mepharshim who ask the question over here that what bothers them. But one of the things is if he should went faster, should always problem. But again, in order to control the narrative, they changed the opinion. Tosfos says, he's saying he adds the word. See, Rashi doesn't say that. What does Rashi say? Okay, same idea is that did he not have a better means of transportation? The Gemara, if you remember, we learned the Gemara in Balak and Bilam. It said that when Bilam was riding on his donkey, also they made fun of him, right? They said, "Where's your horse?" And he had to lie. The horse is in the pastures, whatever. That he had to make. That's where the donkey kept on contradicting him. But also there, the heads of Midian him over, wondering what's this guy traveling on a donkey. Hargu Shar, they slew an ox. Some point out that that had they written man, it could have been misunderstood as saying that Jacob was upset due to the murder of the single individual, Shechem, or according to certain opinions, due to his son's intentions to kill Yosef. Therefore, they wrote ox to show that Jacob was upset about the wanton slaying of animals, and all the more so over the slaying of people. So the Pnei Yeshua says the narrative is different, that even if he cares about animals, he surely cares about all the people. But the Rashi is the opinion is that Rashi says is that the idea is that how you present the narrative. That on the contrary, if the Torah is going to say that Yaakov viewed Shechem as collateral damage, that's okay. But if you're going to call it murder, then we have an issue. Noise b'nei adam. Some explain that they did not ride donkey so the people would not wonder why Moshe did not find a quicker animal, like I said, in order to accelerate the redemption of the Jewish people. Others explain that it is disrespectful for Moshe to mention a donkey as that. Others explain that it is disrespectful to Moshe to mention a donkey, as that would depict him as walking on foot alongside the animal. That's also not good. Also, others say it wouldn't be nice that a woman was riding on a donkey, so therefore they said gomel. There's all kind of the Bnei Yehoidah says that also it wasn't appropriate that Tzipora would be riding on a donkey. It's not appropriate. But at the end, the reason is because this is the same chamor that Avram Avinu traveled on and the Mashiach is going to travel on. Okay, another change that they made was the big question that we all have, right? When you open up the Torah, you say, how long were the Jewish people in Egypt? 400 years, but they weren't 400 years in Egypt. It doesn't that the math doesn't add up. So it says, so they just added Moshe bnei Yisrael shel yashvu Mitzrayim b'shar tzayit arba me'ishana. So they added that it wasn't just it wasn't just Eretz Mitzrayim, but all countries that they were foreign in. So they added the word b'shar tzayis, so that the people, so he shouldn't start doing the math. So Rashi, this is a Rashi that certain times, we know the Rebbe always taught us about Rashi, that Rashi is very exact. Rashi is like, if there's one commentary in the Torah that you have to mamish, especially in the Torah, but even in the Talmud, that you have to mamish check every word. Rashi was very careful, and we see that clearly. When he wants to write short, he could write very short. When he elaborates and repeats himself, so then there's a reason for it. So this idea that Rashi quotes about the 400 years, he quotes over and over again in Chumash a few times, more than once. The question is why. There's something that bothers Rashi in that he constantly repeats the same idea, and he does the same calculation in the Gemara. Why? Because Rashi says the reason they added other lands, not just Egypt, because then they would say there's a lie. Why? Because Talmai HaMelech would say, 1 second, who was there? There was Kahas, Miyard Mitzrayim. Kahas comes down to Egypt. Who's Kahas? Kahas is the son of Levi. Okay, so Kahas, the son of Levi, came to Egypt. Means he wasn't born in Egypt. He was born in Eretz Yisrael. How old was Kahas? In the years of Amram, Kahas' son, Moshe's father. And you add Moshe's years. So add Moshe's 80 years. Amram's 100 and something years. And Kahas' 100 and something years, you don't get 400 years. So Moshe left at 80. Kahas was already born. So where's the 400 years? And the problem, also the thing is, Kahas didn't conceive Amram the last day of his life. And Amram didn't conceive Moshe in the last day of his life. So their years also went together. Part of the years of Kahas, Amram was alive. And of course, part of the years of Amram, Moshe was alive. So then, and you still don't have 400 years, even if he did conceive him the last day. So then the math of 400 years, he would say, you guys are lying. You weren't there 400 years. It's always interesting. And this is, again, you see this till today. When people quote verses against the story itself, right? I was listening to some anti-Semite recently who was saying the book of Esther is a book of genocide. It means you're taking part of the story as you understand it to use it for your narrative of anti-Semitism, but your source is the book itself, right? So the same thing over here. You're saying that your fathers are lying. Why? Because how do you know how old Kahas was? Talmai HaMelech doesn't have info on Kahas. He opens the Torah. The Torah says how old Kahas was. The Torah says how old Amram was. The Torah says how old Moshe was. And the Torah also says the Jewish people were 400 years in Egypt. So you're saying that your Torah is lying. It's not lying. I mean, you have to figure it out. But you can't say it's lying because your whole source of your question is the Torah. But again, when someone's looking to ask questions, it's not about the facts. So, but again, we see that the Torah is concerned with this. And therefore the rabbis were concerned with this. Therefore, they made the chase and they added Sha'ar Tzois, other lands. In that case, they weren't lying. They were basically saying that because it was from other lands. It started from when Yitzchak was born. So, when was it? By the Bein Absarim. When Avram was 70 years old, is when God told him about the exile. It was 30 years when Avram was 70, and Yitzchak was born when he was 100. So altogether, it's 430 years. That's if you count the 30 years of Bris Ben Absarim. If you count the 40 years, the 400 years from Yitzchak's born, then you could count with Yitzchak and Yaakov and the Yitzchak's 160 years of his living and 180 years of his living, and Yaakov 160 years or so of his living, whatever. All those years you add together, 48 years. So you add them together, you have 400 years. So you have 60 of Yitzchak and 130 the Yaakov. So then that's 190. So when he came to Mitzrayim, it was already 190 years. Nishru Masayim Vesher, and then it's 210 years. And 210 years is what we know. Redu, the Jewish people were actually in Egypt 210 years. But from when Yitzchak was born, it was 400 years. And also the decree was never, I'm saying you're going to be in Egypt. I'm saying you're going to be in a foreign land. V'loi nemer b'Mitzrayim, ele be'eretz lo lehem, in a land that's not theirs. Ukshenolad Yitzchak, when Yitzchak was born, haya Avram gar be'eretz plishtim. From when Yitzchak was born, Avram wasn't home. He was by Avimelech, by the Philistines. And then there was there in Philistines, and then Yitzchak was also in the Philistines. They weren't settled, the Jewish people. And also, why didn't we count the 30 years from the Gzeira itself to say 430 years? Why did they say 400 years? Because the decree was the descendants of Yitzchak. And Yitzchak wasn't born until 30 years later. Okay, the next change that they make, again, this Rashi does this math many times in the Chumash as well. It says, the Pasuk says that, like this, it says, and he sent the youths of the children of Israel who brought burnt offerings. So they changed the youths to Zatute, which means, and he sent the elected Zatute, which is a more respectful terminology. And then also later it says that Zatute, the elected ones, he didn't strike them down when they celebrated after the giving of the Torah. Again, because he shouldn't say that the Jewish people, were sending young guys. Well, why wouldn't you send it? Why wouldn't you send appropriate people for the sacrifices? The reason is because the Bachurim, or the young people, that they were the Na'orim, they were clear of sin. Why? Because they were still, before they were married, they didn't have women. Last night, or those in America, today was the yahrzeit of the Kohen Gadol. So, if we're already mentioning the idea of Nari B'nai Yisrael, the people that hadn't had relations with women, that therefore we want to talk about purity. The story goes that once the Jewish people, the Or Chaim eventually lived in a very difficult life. The Or Chaim is buried in Har Zaysim. They once needed him for a bracha. There was a big, I think there was a famine or something. They needed him for a bracha, and he was deep in study. He was very, very holy. The Or Chaim HaKadosh was very, very holy. He lived in Yerushalayim. He passed away a good few years before the Baal Shem Tov, but they lived the same time. And the Or Chaim HaKadosh was in study, and he needed his attention, but no one dared touch him. So he said that he took a young girl, who was before that she never had a episode of bleeding yet, and they had her not touch him, but just pull a little bit at his sweater, and then it caught his attention, and they asked him why, because that's the idea of kedusha. So same thing over there. They wanted to use the pasuk used young boys because it's more kedusha, even though Talmai HaMelech wouldn't have seen it that way. Zutei lashon cheshivas avanari lashon katnas. They changed the word from nare, which is youth, to zutei, means the chosen ones. Why are you sending young boys? But the truth is, young boys have certain value because they're before they've had relations. Even though they changed two psukim. The end of the second pasuk also Atzili. Atzili is more like we have in this week's parsha by Yotzel, that it's like the anointed ones, or they come over. But they already changed it to talking about, use the same word zutei. Okay, let's skip this Tosfos. Let's see the footnote from Rabbi Steinsaltz. Some write the 400 years we're talking about. Some write that they wrote specifically 400 years and not 430, so that it would correspond to the number mentioned in the revelation of Avram, that he said 400 years. But if you're counting from when the actual decree happened, it was 430 years. The elect ones, Rav Tzemach Gaon explains that Zatute means relatively young men, not youths, and not elders, but in between. Okay, this is let's just skip to the next piece, because I want to finish the Mishnah and try to get to the next Mishnah here. The next change that he made, where Moshe says in the Parsha of Korach, right? We just learned this recently, that Moshe says to God, when Korach is accusing Moshe of taking too much leadership, so he says, "Loi chamor echad mehem nasasi." I didn't take one donkey. So the Talmai HaMelech would say, a donkey you didn't take, but you took other things, right? Again, it's funny because you usually a person's, there's an expression that says kol atayita. That Moshe asked God also himself before the story with Talmai HaMelech, that there's certain expressions in the Torah that give space for people to misinterpret it. So God says, I'm saying what I'm saying. Whoever wants to make a mistake, that's their problem. That's kind of an elevated approach. I'm going to say it the way I want to say it. If you misread it because you want to manipulate the text to go with your agenda, that's your problem. But when it came to Talmai HaMelech, we see that there was a concern. And they did make changes because he had an agenda, and they didn't want him to use that agenda. The agenda would be to kind of break down the holiness and the message of Torah. So therefore, he would say, yeah, he didn't take a donkey, but he took something else, right? So that's always that kind of like, ipcha mistabri, yeah, sure. He didn't take a donkey, but he took something else. Again, where are you taking this from? The Torah, but so that they changed that. Rashi says, also, there's other commentaries say, again, the word chamor meant, because Rashi says that when he came to Mitzrayim, when someone gets a job, so it's called a business expense. So Moshe Rabbeinu was saying, I never used the business card. Right? When God said to Moshe, go to Egypt and save the Jewish people, Moshe had a job. He was working for Yisro. God says, I'm asking you to leave your job and go take the Jewish people. Moshe could have said, okay, give me a credit card. It's going to cost me money. I have to move my family. It's a business expense. You want me to move locations, right? If you move someone for a new job, I had to move from Midian back to Egypt. I have to move my family. I need transportation. So Moshe could have said to the Jewish people, listen, I'm here to redeem you. Here's the receipts. And Moshe didn't do that. So the idea then would have been chamor, and then would have mentioned the chamor that, again, didn't want to mention the donkey. So, Asher cholak Hashem oisam lahoyer lachalam. These are verses later in Devarim that could be understood to be certain levels of permitting or statements about idol worship. So it says over here that to the verse that is discussed in the worship of the sun and the moon, which is written, which the Lord your God has allowed it to the nations. So you would think, allowed it to the nations, that they could serve idols. So they changed it to mean, not that they could serve the sun and the moon, which they did those days, they served, but to give light to the world. They would say that, oh, see, God says that the nations could serve idols. And the Medrash says, why did he say that? Because that sometimes God looks to let people make the mistakes, and then later, if you want to make a mistake, right? What do we say about Bilam? From this we learn that if you want to go somewhere, if you really want to go somewhere, you're going to go somewhere. You want to go on a path that's self-destructive. God told Bilam not to go there. Bilam says, I want to go there. So God says, if you want to go there, go there. It means God's going to tell you to try to hold you back. If you're set on your mind to be in a mode of self-destruction, God's going to let you go there. So same thing over here. God made verses that could have been misunderstood. And they're going to say, oh, why didn't he be careful? If you want to go there, you want to make those mistakes, I'm not going to prevent you from making those mistakes. The Mashar writes that the sages explained the verse, I have not taken one donkey from them as follows. Even when Moshe needed to travel from Midian to Egypt, like I said, to take the Jews out of Egypt, he did not take from the children of Israel even the donkey on which he transported his family, since the 72 elders feared that Talmai HaMelech's reaction, they changed the term from donkey to item of value. But again, Moshe could have charged. He didn't charge. Again, the expression, no good deed goes unpunished. Moshe was showing that he really meant it for the Jewish people, but Korach didn't take it that way. Korach could care less. Korach says you're just hogging all the jobs. Vayelech, chas from the word hogging, but you're taking all the jobs. Vayelech v'yaved l'kim acherim asher lo yitzivisi l'avdam. Another verse it says, and he has gone and served other gods and worshipped them, either the sun and the moon or any other host in the heaven, which I have not commanded. Could be understood as indicating that God did not command their existence. That it means they added the word la'avdam. Why? Because it could be that God didn't want the sun and the moon, but they came anyways. If they wouldn't add the word to serve, mashma that they should be. They would say, they were created against God's will. So it says that they would think that the sun and the moon themselves being created wasn't commanded by God. So who created them? They're self-made. Therefore, they add the word of them. I didn't command that you should serve them. They're there for your benefit, but not that you should serve them. Okay, now one more verse. This is an interesting one. When it comes to the non-kosher animals, we have our navet. Our navet is a rabbit. So there, they knew that Talmai HaMelech's mother was called Arnavet. So they didn't want it to make that the Torah was laughing at his mother, so they took out the words to Tzi'iris Reglaim, to short-legged, like a rabbit has shorter front legs than back legs. They Kosvas Arnavet, they didn't write the word Arnavet, because his wife, means of the first Talmai, is Arnavet Shema, her name was Arnavet, that the Jews are laughing at me and they put my mother's name in the Torah. When a side note, when I was a friend of mine was once in the Bahamas for Shabbos, because there was a very wealthy person that would fly a minion every Shabbos. He wanted a minion every Shabbos. He would fly a minion every Shabbos. So he was a young boy then. I don't know if it's still that custom of that person, but he would fly them in and put them up for Shabbos. He said he should have a minion. So in that Shabbos was Shabbos Shmini, and in that, for I'm sure not by chance, but then the former Prime Minister of Israel, Shimon Peres, was in Israel, obviously to see this person who was a very influential person. So he joined the minyan, and the custom by Sephardim, unlike Ashkenazim, is when you call someone up to the Torah, even though Shimon Peres himself was not Shabbos observant, but he came to the minyan, so he got an aliyah. These are the Babbacha boys. They gave Shimon Peres an aliyah, so he started to read. He told them, no, our custom is we read, but he got the aliyah, which had the non-kosher animals, and one of the non-kosher birds was the Peres. So he was laughing that his name was also mentioned in the Torah as a non-kosher bird. So we see it's not so out of the world to get offended by your name being in the Torah. So they took out the word arnavet and they put in the short-legged foot, the short-legged animal. That they put my name in the Torah, my mother's name in the Torah. The kosvu b'makim ha'sarnavis asiris reglaim lefish yodea ktsaris v'ktanis miragla, because the feet of the rabbit are shorter than the back feet. Obviously, you would imagine that he also would wonder why the Torah all of a sudden is describing an animal as opposed to giving it its name. Okay, let's Reb Shimon Gamliel says, Af b'sfarim. Okay, lo yitir el shekis v'yivanis. This is the Mishnah. And Reb Shimon Gamliel says that you can only write Greek, and Rabbi Yehuda says that Reb Shimon Gamliel means only the Torah because of the story we just read of Talmai HaMelech. Amar Rabbi Bo, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Halachic Reb Shimon Gamliel. That's the law. That the only language you could write the Sefer Torah is in Greek. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, and the Rabbi Yochanan says, "My time Reb Shimon Gamliel." Where's the basis for it? I mean, we just said that the story is the story of Talmai HaMelech, but where's the basis in the Torah that we could write Greek? So Amar Kra, because there's a pasuk when it talks about Noach's 3 sons coming out of the ark. So it says about one is this Yefes. Yefes is the forefather of the Greeks. And it says, Yafta likim liyefes v'yishkin ba'oile shem. That God shall enlarge Yefes, and he shall dwell in the tents of Shem. And Shem, the tents of Shem is Torah. And from this passage, what does it mean to dwell in the tents of Shem? That the language of Yefes will also be able to be written in the Torah. Dvar of Shal Yefes yu ba'alei Shem. The words of the language of Yefes. Now, Reb Sheinzel says, and the Gemara says also, what about the other descendants of Yefes? Gog and Magog. We're all talking about the war of Gog and Magog. It's a people. Magog is a people, and the descendants of Yefes. Just for everyone's information, if you want to know where Gog and Magog come from, would be why it would make sense, would be countries in the Persians are descendants of Yefes, not descendants of Shem or Cham. So it says Goimer and Magog. Why not that language? So Amar Reb Chia bar Ava, Hainu Tam l'chsiv Yafta l'kim Yefes. Yafyusay shal Yefes yibar l'Shem. Only the beautiful languages of Yefes will be in the tent of Shem. And Goimer and Magog is not a beautiful language. Only the Greek is a beautiful language. And the tradition is Yafyasay shal Yefes hu lashon Yavin. Only Greek. Lashon Yafa mishal kol b'nei Yefes. The commentaries all learn, and that's Reb Stein that springs over here, that this is only referring to ancient Greek, because only ancient Greek is a beautiful language, but the modern day Greek is not. We're not talking about that. The halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, who permits the Torah to be written in ancient Greek, and it is and it has the sanctity of a Sefer Torah. Due to the fact that the modern Greek language is not the Greek discussed in the Gemara Torah scrolls, written in Greek are no longer sacred. So it's not modern day Greek; it was ancient Greek. He finishes off one more. the beauty of Yefes. It is stated in the Jerusalem Talmud that the Greek language is one of the 4 beautiful languages in the world. And in Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi preferred Greek to be spoken to the spoken Aramaic. So they enjoyed Greek over Aramaic, and that's why it's a beautiful language. Okay. Unfortunately, we went a little slow now. I went a little maybe too far back, but the next Mishnah we have is going to be talking about the laws, interesting laws about the different Kohanim. We know that there's 2 types of there could be a Kohen Gadol could be sidelined, a high priest could be sidelined from his job temporarily, and then you have to promote someone else. And the question is, after that person's demoted back down, when the first high priest gets his job back, what happens? So it's not so simple. So we're going to learn about there could be 2 high priests at the same time, but they don't have the same laws. And after that, we're going to go into also the question about the different temples, which is going to be good for the 3 weeks. Which is the question of the different temples. I think that is Shiloh and Yerushalayim. Yes, the difference in Shiloh and Yerushalayim, about what's the difference between the tabernacle and the Beis HaMikdash, all appropriate to the time of Tammuz and Av. All right, everyone, thank you so much for joining. B'ezras Hashem, next week we'll be back on